taught a lot of classes on hand planing, and I've done a lot of demonstrations on hand planing. And both the woodworkers and the non-woodworkers watching are fascinated by these guys. They love the shavings. In fact, you can tell a new woodworker by the fact that they post pictures of their shavings on social media. Shavings are wonderful. In this case of Alaskan yellow cedar, they smell wonderful too. But did you know that they actually can inform you on how to hand plane and how to improve your hand plane to get a flatter board? What I want to show you is an excerpt from a larger lesson in the Hand Tool School. That's handtoolschool.net in case you're curious. And this is one of hundreds and hundreds of lessons that I have in the library over there. But it will specifically show you how to examine the shape of the shaving to tell you what to do next. Every time you make a plane pass, you really should be clearing the shavings from the mouth. And it's not because we're neat freaks, but it's because the size, shape, and location of the shaving can tell you volumes about what you're planing. So let's just take a pass down the board and see what we can see. Okay, so the shaving that just came out there, little tiny shaving, but it is full width of this narrower board. But you see, it only took a shaving here, and then it broke up and it didn't take any more shavings until really the very end. So immediately with that single pass, I know that this is my high spot, and it's high enough that it's actually keeping the blade out of the cut almost until the very end of the cut. This is a big high spot here. And if I run my finger along it, I can feel that high spot as well. So my first step should be to just make a bunch of passes right there. Now again, the shavings that spit out, they're coming out full length, and they're coming out right in the center of the plane as well. They're not skewed to one side or another. So now, as I take a pass, it runs longer, but it stops cutting, and then it cuts again at the very end. And what you'll find is that that shaving gets a little bit longer with each pass. This is a pretty typical board we're dealing with here. Now I'm getting a full length shaving. That one was full length, and now this board is flat. So let's pop this board out and putting something a little bit thicker. See what we can learn about this. So now let's make a pass. All right, it jumped there, and it jumped there. So we've got a low spot here, and a low spot here, and a tiny bit of a high spot up here. Let me make that pass again and see if I can keep that shaving intact. Okay, let's pull this first shaving out. This was the part, this section of this section. This next shaving is broken up, and it's actually slanted towards the left side of the plane a little bit. And it's not full length, which tells me, first of all, I've got this interruption here, this low spot here, and the low spot runs all the way up to about here, and then there's a high spot that is actually right there. As the plane came across, it cut, I'm sorry, this is the low spot I'm marking, the high spot is actually right here. As the plane came across, the shaving shifted from full width to off to the left, so it was only cutting on that side. So if I were to come up and purposely skew the plane off to the side, just take some narrower cuts, again you can see the shavings coming out on the right side there. Now come back, so now I've got a full length shaving, and it's a full width shaving that ran all the way out. So that tells me again that I'm good to go. But I can just feel running down this board that it is not square. There's definitely some odd spots to it. I have a high edge, pretty significantly high back here. It starts to level out in here, and then it goes high on this side down here. So the board is actually twisted. It runs like that. What I want to do is plane this high edge and then plane this high edge. So I'm going to let the location of the shaving tell me what I'm doing. So I'm going to skew the plane off to one side. Just take a shaving, and you can see there's the shaving right there. Now I'm going to turn it, and the shaving went from narrow to wide, and then it tapered off because I began to move the plane off the other side. So you can see here's where the shaving just interrupted and tapered off. Let's do that again. Shaving just on the left, becoming full width, and now just on the right side of the board. So I get this weird, wonky looking shaving that actually skews its way across the board. Now I'll take a full length pass. But for the most part, you can see that shaving is coming out even, and it's got a well-defined edge. See how crisp these edges are? That shows that you're getting a cut all the way to the edge. Here's a little divot right here where it broke up, where there's some part missing. It's a low spot in there. Nothing that another pass couldn't clear up. Now again, perfect full width, full length shaving right in the middle of the plane tells me that I've got a nice true edge. I'm nice and square all the way through the board. And just paying attention to where that shaving is coming out of the plane will tell you a lot about the topography, where you need to remove material, and how the plane is doing its job. Here's something that's really important. Let me purposely take this out of square. So I just angled the plane, and now I've got a pretty significant bevel. I'll come back here and take a plane pass. Well, look at that. This shaving, it's really skinny. Because as I just made that pass, all I did was take a shaving over on this side, because that bevel I created, which bevel kind of starts right about there and it angles down from there. So my shaving just hit this flat part along the top, and you can see the shaving matches that width as well. So when you're working with a board that's out of flat, you don't want to be tipping your plane or anything. You want to try to keep it as flat as possible. And what I would do is keep planing, clearing those shavings so I can see what the pass I just took looks like. And you'll see now my shavings are starting to get wider than the original pass. It's because I'm increasing this flat on the surface. And I'm slowly lowering the surface down till I get a square edge. And now I've got a shaving that runs the full width of the board, and it tells me ideally it's square, but more importantly I've removed the facet and I pulled it all into line. Just for ease of demonstration, I'm showing the edges of boards. The same thing will happen with the faces of boards. You can tell a lot about the topography of a board and where the grain is running and how it's responding to the plane just by paying attention to the shape and the location and size and all the fun little characteristics of that shaving. But beyond just typical bench planes and milling faces flat, this can also be incredibly useful in joinery. If you ever have used something like a rabbeting block plane to true up the cheek of a tenon, paying attention to where the shaving comes out of the plane will tell you where the high spots are on the tenon. Or if you wanted to plane, say, a rabbet, and you start running down the board and you see the shaving is on one side or the other, that will tell you that rabbit is out of square. And you need to really push the body of the rabbit plane up against the shoulder to bring that rabbit into square. So say the rabbit were high on the outside and it slopes down towards the shoulder. As you run the plane down, you're only going to see a shaving on the outside of that plane. But you keep that plane pressed up against the wall, and eventually you'll start to see that shaving get wider and wider and creep its way back into the other side of the plane until you get a full width shaving. And as long as you've kept the plane pressed up against that shoulder, when you see that shaving change shape and meet the shoulder, you now have gotten a square shaving, just by paying attention to the shape and the location of that shaving. So yeah, they're real pretty and fun to unroll and pile up and stuff your presents with at Christmas time. But they can tell you a heck of a lot about the work that you're doing right here and now. Now, as I've said, this is just one of hundreds of lessons that you can find at the Hand Tool School. And if you're looking to up your game, your woodworking game, whether you're a power tool woodworker or a hand tool woodworker, I guarantee you can benefit from learning some hand tool skills. And that's what I've been doing since 2010 at the Hand Tool School. There's a bunch of different ways you can do this. If you're kind of looking for structure and you don't know where to start or where to go next, our semesters offer a step-by-step curriculum for learning cabinet making, learning turning, learning carving. If you're somebody that learns best in context and says, I want to build a table in order to learn mortise and tenon, I've got a bunch of projects that you can engage via the project approach. Or if you really know, hey, I need to improve my ability to square a board, well, then you can look at the lessons we have on specific techniques. If you just don't know, you can actually subscribe on a recurring subscription model, something like Netflix, where you can get access to everything. Become what I call an apprentice, and you get every semester, every project, every technique lesson, all the sharpening videos, all the printed stuff, everything. Thousands and thousands of hours of content that I've been putting together and responding to students' questions since 2010. That's apprenticeship. But there's so many different ways depending on how you want to learn. The important part is pick up a hand plane, pick up a handsaw, pick up a chisel, and become more in tune with what the wood is telling you as the blade begins to cut. And that's really what I hope you get from this particular lesson. And go to handtoolschool.net and check us out.